You may recall from a service at the beginning of the summer when Merging Waters co-president Brian Hill had the honor of sharing news that Merging Waters had received a gift in the amount of $200,000 from the estate of former member Rosemary Hagen. Today we want to more formally recognize that generous gift. I'll begin by sharing a little biographical information, and then our other co-president, Liz Howarth, will share some thoughts from the board. Rosemary Hagen, along with her husband Paul, were longtime members of Merging Waters back when we were still named Michael Servetus Unitarian Society, until they relocated to Florida in 1989. Friendships from their time at MSUS were treasured and continued even as they and other former members moved away from here. In Florida, Rosemary and Paul, and Rosemary alone after Paul's death, were connected and active in UU churches in Sarasota and Venice. Rosemary was born August 25th, 1924, and died on June 4th, 2024, just a few months shy of her 100th birthday. She was born and raised in Minneapolis and spent many of her adult years in the area, though she and Paul lived in New York for a time as well. Rosemary and Paul were married for 53 years until his death in 2001. During her working years, Rosemary taught English, remedial reading, and speech for 28 years to students in 7th through 12th grade. She was active in various civic groups, both here and in Florida. One of her interests was women's rights, and in 1965 she was appointed to the Minnesota Governor's Commission on the Status of Women by the governor at the time, Karl Rolvag. I did not have the pleasure of knowing Rosemary, but Marty Reckdahl knew Rosemary well and shared a few memories. Rosemary and Paul loved to travel. One year they both had sabbatical leaves and they traveled around the whole world. When they returned the next year, they presented at Sunday morning services stories with pictures about their travels in Europe, the Soviet Union, India, Africa, and South America. One year, probably in the 1980s, there was a march on Washington in which people from all over the United States participated. Rosemary asked me to join her on the march, and I did. We got ourselves to Washington, D.C., and then joined thousands of marchers and marched a few miles all together to the Capitol. That was a memorable experience for which I'm grateful to have been involved. We were marching for better pay for women and equal rights for blacks and other minorities. It was exhilarating and tiring to do this, but it was also fun and very memorable. Rosemary's house in Florida was filled with art. Sculptures were on the walls and shelves in every room, and paintings and drawings covered the walls. So much art, beautiful art, and Rosemary had met or knew most of the artists who created all this beauty. Rosemary herself created art, and Marty still has one of Rosemary's paintings. Marty concludes, Rosemary Hagen was an astonishing woman and a wonderful friend to have. I feel very lucky to have known her all these many years. Sarah Jocelyn, who is a child of founding members Wyman and Grace Smith, remembers both Rosemary and Paul as being joyful and exuberant. After the Wymans moved to Vermont, Sarah enjoyed when Rosemary and Paul visited. Sarah summed up with, Rosemary Hagen was truly a joy. In 2019, when she was 95, Rosemary published a memoir titled Probably Up to No Good. The cover photo is of Rosemary holding a python while traveling in Peru. Ken Brennan, another former congregant who now lives in Florida, also remained connected to Rosemary, and he even received a mention in her book. From her own telling in her memoir, Rosemary was encouraged to be an independent thinker and make her own decisions from a young age. She was a person who was not content to sit on the sidelines, but actively partook in what life had to offer. At age 97, she was the subject of a Nifty Neighbors column in an article titled, She's a Nifty Nonagenarian. At the time, she was living independently, finding ways to help at her UU congregation in Venice, continuing to participate in Great Decisions and the Gulf Coast Humanists, as well as tending her garden, painting, and reading. Early in 2024, Rosemary contacted us, our congregation, about making a legacy donation, and at that time gifted us approximately $6,000 in stock. So we were surprised to be contacted this past June by Rosemary's lawyer and deeply honored to learn that we were to receive an additional gift of $200,000 from her estate. I created this little memory board up here with Rosemary's obituary and that nifty nonagenarian article that I mentioned, and we'll put that out in the foyer, I guess, and we can have it out for a few weeks. I also have a copy of her memoir, and I'd be happy to share that if anyone is interested. I hope that we can be inspired by Rosemary's life and generosity. And now Liz has some reflections from the board.
Thank you, Katie. I am Liz Hallworth, the co-president of Merging Waters Unitarian Congregation. And as Katie mentioned, the legacy gift that Rosemary Hagen bestowed upon Merging Waters came as a wonderful surprise. Because the donation was gifted with no restrictions, no strings attached, the board has begun discussions and brainstorming about how best we can use this opportunity to sustain our congregation and bring our mission to life. We want this decision to be both considered and deliberate. To that end, we plan to take the coming year to listen, to learn, to decide what to do with Rosemary's gift. During this time, we will also be inviting congregational input, most likely through a community forum. We have identified 3 main areas for potential use of Rosemary's legacy donation. Number 1, supporting our ongoing operations. Number 2, funding a special project within our congregation. And the third one, making a contribution to a community partner or external organization. We imagine that a combination of these 3 approaches may be most appropriate, and we look forward to your help in deciding how to divide the gift amongst them. In the short term, the board does feel a sense of urgency around food security in our community. We are working with our community partner SECA to provide a one-time gift in November or December of this year. In the meantime, please feel free to contact me or Co-President Brian Hill with any thoughts or questions that you have. What an amazing person Rosemary was, and what a generous and loving gift she has left us.